Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from Delta CX, and we are a full service CX and UX consultancy. We do projects, training, and consulting. You can check out our new site at customercentricity.com. And if you'd like to fit somewhere in my travel schedule, you can find that online at cxcc.to/speaking. And I hope you will find a spot for me somewhere in your world. Hello, Ana Lucia. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that better than I was. And everyone will be excited that I finally updated the Low Ego Action Heroes from YouTube. Thanks to everybody who has been donating to the channel. Our oldest members, not in personal age, are first. So wow, thank you to Charlene and Anita, Chang, Darren, Ralitza, and some others who've been donating to the channel for almost 2 years. So thank you so much for keeping me in streaming software and chocolate chips. Hello from New York City to you too. It doesn't say who you are though, so who are you? See, it says LinkedIn user. So today we're going to talk about crappy arguments. Now that sounds like I'm going to talk about arguing, people bickering or whatever, but arguments is also the word we use when people are having a discussion and they're disagreeing. And whether or not there's some debate in there, there's, people disagreeing. And there's obviously great ways to disagree and have discussions and get your points out there and disagree with other people's points. And then there's some pretty terrible ways to do that. So we're going to be talking about my argument pyramid. Now, my argument pyramid isn't totally my argument pyramid because it comes from Graham's hierarchy of disagreement. What's that, you ask? Let's pull that up on the screen and talk about it. So you should see me and the optional tip jar and the chat room. Oh, Noisy Doll says, I love that theme song. I know, me too. We've had it like 2 years and I love it. We'll have it forever. So Graham created this hierarchy of disagreement. And basically, the higher you go up the pyramid, the better this is from the perspective of, are you arguing to the point? Are you staying on point? Or are you just kind of being a jerk? So this is the original version, and then I'll show you my variation of it that I sometimes roll out on LinkedIn and on the channel here. Now, this isn't the original one. This is someone's visual interpretation of it and with some of their own examples. If you Google Graham's hierarchy of disagreement, his example is not "you are an asshat." He actually uses a homophobic slur, not because he thinks that, but because it's an example of name calling. So I'm kind of happy that whoever made this version cleaned that up a little bit. So at the very bottom of the pyramid, which is kind of the lowest form of disagreeing with someone, is name calling. You are an asshat. The next level is ad hominem, which is Latin basically for, I think, to the man. Someone help me with my Latin on that one. And basically, this is a style of disagreement where you are talking more about the characteristics or the authority of someone else without addressing the argument. So when people say to me, like, oh yeah, well, you're stupid, or you're ugly, or, I don't think you know enough to be able to have an opinion on that. That's definitely ad hominem, or ad hominem, if we're going to pronounce our Latin without H's. And so it's a very common disagreement tactic, and that's how you know your argument or your disagreement or your conversation is at a pretty low level when it's basically another flavor of name calling. Next, hey, Steph, thank you. Thank you to Steph and Steph's dance partners. Hey, Alvina. Next in Graham's hierarchy of disagreement, you have responding to tone. This is criticizing the tone of the writing without addressing the substance of the argument. So again, notice that at the very lowest points of the pyramid, we're at doing our worst. We're complaining about someone's tone, or how we think they sound, rather than addressing whatever the topic is. Contradiction is just stating the opposite case with little or no supporting evidence. I think I had something like that in a Medium comment the other day in my article about debates. Someone said, oh, Elvina says, ad hominem is against a man. Okay, thank you. I had my Latin prepositions wrong there. Thank you. Contradiction is, no, it's not. You know, Monty Python does a great sketch about that. If anyone knows the Monty Python Argument Clinic sketch, where they try to differentiate between a good argument and just contradicting someone. So an argument would be, a contradiction would be, no, it isn't, without offering much or any evidence to your point or disagreement. Next, you have counter-argument, where you are contradicting someone. You're saying, no, it isn't, but then you have some sort of reasoning or supporting evidence for the no, it isn't side of your argument. So if someone says democratization is the greatest thing to happen to UX, if you just say, no, it isn't, then you're at contradiction. If you say, no, it isn't, and here's 17,000 reasons why, then you'd be more in that counter-argument bucket. Ana Lucia says, well, sometimes we do have to address the tone. If someone was screaming at me, I would be, please chill. I think it depends upon the situation, but we'll certainly talk more about tone policing and responding to tone throughout our show today. I'm sure many of you can think of examples when you were tone policed, as it's called, or when someone just responded to what they felt was the tone or accused you of having emotion that you didn't have. Towards the top of the pyramid, we have refutation. Finds the mistake and explains why it's mistaken using quotes. Now, when they say using quotes, they don't mean air quotes like this. He usually means by being able to quote a reliable, reputable, hopefully fact-checked source, to be able to say, you're saying this, but I see the mistake in what you're saying, and this reliable source that I can quote shows why some or all of your argument doesn't work or doesn't make sense or isn't right. Elvina says, oh no, Debbie, you were right. To a man is the correct one. Okay, good. My 11th grade Latin class finally pays off. So yes, it's to a man. I think if it were against a man, it would be contro. That's what it is in Italian, I think. So it'd probably be something like that, considering how close Latin and Italian can be in some ways. Finally, at the top of our pyramid, which is the best argument or discussion or debate or disagreement situation you can have, would be refuting the central point. And this is where someone explicitly refutes your central point. So if I say, democratization is the worst thing to happen to UX, and someone disagrees with that, they can say, okay, I disagree with that, and here is very specifically why democratization is not the worst thing to happen to UX, or maybe why they think it's a good thing to happen to UX, which would be a bit of a refutation and refuting the central point. But we've got lots of examples of where this does not go right. Oh, hello from India. Hello. Thanks for coming. So let me show you my variation of this pyramid. I'll show you how I use it, and then we'll all try to think of examples, maybe of things we've witnessed on LinkedIn or in social media, and things that have maybe happened to us. So I'm going to flip back to a giant me. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, here I am, giant me. So I have updated my argument pyramid. Those of you who have seen it before, I have a new version of it, and it looks like this. And I've made my screen a little bit darker so it jumps out a little bit more. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to talk through it. But as I'm reading these levels of my triangle, see if you can post in the chat some examples of things that have happened to you, or maybe that you've witnessed in some unattractive social media interactions or real life interactions. So to me, at the bottom of the pyramid, where a disagreement or argument is going pretty much the worst it possibly can, is when someone is threatening you, deleting you, or silencing you. Hello, Nikki, 19. Now, again, there are times where you are blocking people or walking away from people for your own health and safety. I'm not talking about that here. If it would improve your health and safety to disconnect from a person or a situation or an argument, disagreement, debate, please do it. I support you. But this is when we're not at that point and someone decides that the best way to disagree with you is to delete your comment or post or threaten you in some way. Certainly that to me is the lowest of the low. I think even lower than some of the things Graham had at the bottom of his. You know, certainly in the hiding behind anonymity internet age, I think we see a lot of this. And yeah. So threats, deletion, and silencing, when not done for your own health and safety, to me are the worst way. When I see this, I am done. I don't need to play your games. I can go. Oh, thank you, Noisy Doll. Thank you, Noisy Doll, for subscribing to the channel. And everybody, please do subscribe. I am still shadow banned on LinkedIn. No, I'm good on LinkedIn. I'm shadow banned on YouTube, so I appreciate all the subscriptions. And please do tell friends about our super cool shows. The next level on my triangle is the ad hominem and manipulation. Let's talk about this. We know that the ad hominem is attacking your character or saying, oh, well, you're stupid. You don't know about this. You know, I've had a few people say to me, what can you possibly know about UX? You have a degree in music. And I go, I think that's a bit of a character attack. So I'm putting into this bucket character attacks, name calling, tone policing, gaslighting, and anything that is arguing the person and not the argument. So if I say democratization is the worst thing to happen to UX in the last few years, and you go, Debbie's a jerk. She just wants to be elitist. Well, hold on a second. These are character attacks. These are ad hominem, but they're not talking about the central point I was trying to make. Elvina says, that's not what I said. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that on this pyramid. Ana Lucia says, mansplaining, is that included here? Yeah, I think typically mansplaining, though it can happen to anyone of any gender, is typically when someone treats you like you can't possibly know what this is, sometimes because you are a woman, and so you must just not. You can't know this. You know, we always see the examples on Twitter where some guy tweets at a woman like, maybe you should study some physics before you give your opinion on stuff. And they're like, I wrote the paper you're talking about. And so I would say that probably does fit into this bucket because we've made it about the person. We've made it about, oh, you can't possibly know anything about this. You're a woman, or you're not bright, or you haven't, whatever. Steph says, tone policing is my life on LinkedIn. Like, I'm sorry I upset you, but I'm not upset, darling. Yeah, I get that a lot too. And I put that more in that manipulation and gaslighting bucket. In fact, I just did that show last week about feeling gaslit when I was uninvited from a conference where they said, oh, we wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable. And I was like, uncomfortable? Have you found anything that makes me uncomfortable? Why are you pretending I'm so fragile? So yeah, to me, these are more about the person than about whatever the heck we were just talking about. So yeah, and I see this as a form of gaslighting because it's like, oh, I'm sorry you're upset. And it's like, no, I'm not upset. No, you really seem upset. You sound upset. You look upset. It's like, are you trying to mess with my reality here? It's a manipulation. Yeah, Beth says this is in the category of walk away. Just for those of you looking, and I apologize if this is not colorblind friendly, but anything that is kind of purpley or bluey to you, that's going to be walk away. And anything, the top two that are more kind of orangey, this is going well. This is a good conversation or discussion or debate. The rest of it's going to be pretty much walk away. Hi, Paula. Again, ad hominem, manipulation, character attacks. tone policing. I've had a few people write things like, you know, you're making an interesting point, but you know, you sound crazy, or you're making an interesting point, but you sound too passionate, so it's hard to take you seriously. That's tone policing. Like, please listen to my content and not ascribe fake emotions to it. Gaslighting, we've talked about a lot on this channel, and ultimately anything that is arguing the other person. I've been in many fights with agile coaches on LinkedIn, and a few of them have taken the perspective of, like, if I ask them a question about agile, they say, well, are you certified in agile? Well, no. Do I have to be to ask you a question? Well, have you studied agile? Well, hold on. Do I have to have studied it to ask you a question? You're the expert. I'm trying to ask you a question. So it seems like they're trying to make this about me. Steph says, also, accessibility experts, anti-racist, anti-most of the ists, feminists get a lot of tone policing. You should say this more nicely if you want people to listen to your message. You're aggressive. Absolutely agree. Yes, it's unfortunate, but you are totally right. I give you some confetti for that. Yeah, absolutely true. You get a lot of, hey, you're aggressive, or you should find a nicer way to say that. And that's definitely falling into this bucket. Ana Lucia says, when I hear that, I'm sorry you're offended, I just roll my eyes. It doesn't even feel like they're actually sorry. It's victimization. Yeah, they're not sorry. They're trying to paint you as weak or fragile, or it's just you. You're the weirdo who got offended. Noisy Doll says, yeah, anything approaching matter of fact gets interpreted as aggressive. Yeah, we've all been here. Look, it's not a coincidence that many of us in the chat today are women, and we've all gone through this crap, but you know, we know men do as well. Everybody does, especially people of color, people in marginalized groups. This is the story. Next on the pyramid of Deb's hierarchy of disagreement, my argument pyramid, variation of Graham's hierarchy of disagreement, is logical fallacies. We need to talk about logical fallacies. Some people are not familiar with them, and I want people to be more familiar with them because, especially on our critical thinking stream, I'm sometimes yelling these out, and I want people to know what they are. Steph says, I wonder where sea lioning, when someone keeps asking questions to exhaust you while not caring about the answers, goes into this, but it's mostly trolling, maybe bottom of the bottom. Yeah, oh, Beth says, let me decide how I feel. Ugh, yeah, so true. Please do not tell me how I feel. Steph, where does sea lioning go where people keep asking questions to exhaust you? I would probably put that in the, to me, that's a form of manipulation. They're trying to manipulate. Oh, thank you, Karen's brother, for subscribing. I'm not totally sure how to pronounce your name. I'm going to say Hike. I'm getting everyone's name wrong, and everybody knows that, but thank you for the subscription, and thank you to the Karen family for joining us. Yes, so I tend to put the sea lioning and asking questions to exhaust you. I think of that as a manipulation. Could be logical fallacy, but definitely a manipulation. They're trying to manipulate you and distract you so that you can't even talk about the thing. But that also happens in logical fallacies. I think that's also red herrings. So I think it depends on what people are doing and how I would categorize that. So let's talk about some of these logical fallacies. Now, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of logical fallacies. So you're going to want to get to know these better. And I had a web page open where I was going to refer to them. Let me jump over to that. I have a couple of good definitions that I found online, but again, you can look up logical fallacies. There's lots of great information out there, and there's zillions of them. So this one says, a red herring is an argument that uses confusion or distraction to shift attention away from a topic and towards a false conclusion. Red herrings usually contain an unimportant fact, idea, or event that has little relevance to the real issue. Red herrings are a common diversionary tactic when someone wants to shift the focus of an argument to something easier or safer to address. Red herrings can be unintentional. So one of the examples that I want to give, oh, thanks, Hank. Tell me how to pronounce your name. Help. One example that I find that, you know, a lot of you know I don't like Jared Spool, and I find he is the king of actually most of these logical fallacies. I've seen him do the red herring a lot. When he was fighting on LinkedIn with Dr. Ari about democratization, and Dr. Ari had said, hey, you know, there's a reason not everybody is a surgeon, you know, anti-democratization. Jared Spool brings up, well, what about the Afghan immigrants who are taxi drivers but are qualified surgeons? Hold on a moment. We're talking about democratization. Ari's using surgeons as an example, that not everybody is a surgeon. What are you getting at here? Is this a straw man? Is this a red herring? And, oh, there you go. Hike. Oh, hike. Okay, got it. If you just watch Jared Spool in action, you'll see a lot of these logical fallacies, because he likes to set lots of fires in lots of places and get you arguing about all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the original point. He started arguing with Dr. Ari about, shouldn't Afghan immigrants who are qualified surgeons in Afghanistan be allowed to be surgeons here? And sure, that's an interesting question and conversation, but it doesn't necessarily prove or disprove the democratization of UX, which also means it's on us to be careful of what examples we use, because if we use being a surgeon as an example, we might accidentally open up the conversation to people who are like, oh yeah, but surgeons. Now you're all over the place. Now you've opened up the gates, the sheep are running everywhere, the dogs can't even bring in the sheep, we're all over the place. So be careful of red herrings, they are distraction techniques. Let's also talk about generalizations. Just because one thing happened or one thing is true doesn't mean lots of things will happen, or doesn't mean that thing is always true. We make generalizations all the time. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. I had a friend who kept bringing me cups of tea whenever I saw them, or whenever they thought I wanted a drink, and I was like, I don't like tea, why are you bringing me tea? And they said, oh, I know when you're sick you have tea. And I'm like, yeah, when I'm sick I have tea. When I'm not sick, I love a good decaf coffee or hot chocolate. They just kind of generalize. Now, there's nothing wrong there. They're not mean, they're not terrible. Generalizations can be, you know, benign, but certainly they can be used in arguments. And where you mostly hear generalizations is all, every, none, nobody. Seen Jared Spool do this one too. When he was fighting with Dr. Ari, and Dr. Ari gave his definition of democratization of UX, Jared Spool's response was something along the lines of, I've never seen anyone define it that way. Whoa, now we're arguing on a whole new battlefront here. Now we're arguing what is democratization? Now, is that an important point to talk about? Maybe yes, maybe no. But there's a difference between, hey, I'd like to talk more about your definition of democratization, I'm not sure I agree with it, and nobody has the definition you have, or I've never seen anybody have a definition like that. This is a very specific arguing technique, and I would probably drop it in that generalization bucket. LinkedIn user says, where is ignoring or talking over in the pyramid? I think if someone is ignoring you, and not even answering you or listening, I'd probably put that down at the bottom, threats, deletion, and silencing. You're kind of being silenced by being ignored. If they're talking over you, that's not necessarily that might be a manipulation, like I'm going to win this discussion because I'm not even letting you get a word out. I'm going to manipulate your ability to finish a sentence. So I'd probably put that there. There's a lot of things that aren't on this pyramid that we're just going to find a place for them to go. Let's talk about a couple of other common logical fallacies. Let's talk about slippery slope. You might have heard that term before. So a slippery slope argument, and I'm reading the website, assumes a certain course of action will necessarily lead to a chain of future events. The slippery slope fallacy takes a benign premise or starting point and suggests it will lead to unlikely or ridiculous outcomes with no supporting evidence. To me, one of the best examples I can think of slippery slope is some of the arguments against marriage equality in America. There were people who were against it who said, well, if we let men marry men, then we're going to let dogs marry toasters and we're going to let people marry horses. That's a slippery slope argument. There's nothing about letting two people who love each other marry each other that says that we're next going to let people marry inanimate objects or animals who can't give their consent. So that is what's called a slippery slope. Noisy Doll says, I wondered if Jared could have done a better job tying his example back to the argument at hand. I keep seeing people on LinkedIn going for the mic drop explosive statement without clarifying much. Totally agree. And yes to what you're saying. We see that a lot. Like, I'm going to say something so wild you can't even respond to it. And my thought is, that's fine. I won't respond. I'm just going to walk away. Like, for example, I got a comment on one of my Medium articles today, and this is nearly a direct quote. The person wrote, this is shitty and limited thinking. Perhaps your real problem is this. Who would like to tell me which of the things on this pyramid fit that? I'll say it again. This is shitty and limited thinking. Perhaps your real problem was this. Go. Noisy Doll also says, I would like more good faith discussion of term definitions just for understanding. I often think that's where we have to start a discussion or debate. Like, hi, I'm against the democratization of UX. Let me give you my definition of democratization so I can make sure we're even talking about the same thing. Because when I tell you I'm against the democratization of UX, I don't mean breaking down silos. I don't mean sharing insights and artifacts with others. I mean letting anybody do anybody's jobs without oversight or governance. Solomon says, ad hominem. LinkedIn user says, ad hominem and manipulation. I agree. Yeah, damn autocorrect. That's okay. I know people aren't usually writing odd, given the, it's Latin. So yes, I totally agree. If you say, hey, that's shitty and limited thinking, that's definitely, you're now arguing me. And whatever my abilities to think are, maybe it was shitty thinking, but that's definitely not the best way to raise that issue. Why not continue to refute the central point? Sorry, I got to point this way. Refute the central point and say, okay, you said this about this. I'm not sure I agree with you. Here's my opposite argument. You can do all of that without saying your thinking is shitty and limited. So that's why it ends up low on the pyramid here. So yeah, if anybody wants to put in any other examples of things they've seen people say or do in discussions, arguments, debates, and we'll all try to find where it lives on the pyramid. Let me talk a little bit more about logical fallacies, because another one you're going to see a lot is straw man, and I want to talk about false dilemma also. So a straw man, and I'm reading this website that I found, a straw man argument attacks a different subject rather than the topic being discussed, often a more extreme version of the counter-argument. The purpose of this misdirection is to make one's position look stronger than it actually is. The straw man argument is appropriately named after a harmless, lifeless scarecrow. Instead of contending with the actual argument, they attack the equivalent of a lifeless bundle of straw, an easily defeated puppet that the opponent was never arguing in the first place. I used to call this boxing ghosts. I feel like I'm boxing and fighting a ghost because this person has made up some weird thing and now they want to fight that. This thing isn't even real. This thing doesn't even exist, and they want to fight that. LinkedIn user says, I suspect a lot of this stems from a zero-sum way of thinking. Someone needs to win and someone needs to lose. Yeah, that's definitely probably in play most, if not all of the time, because very rarely do we see two people say, agree to disagree and truly mean it, or, you know, hey, it's okay if we believe different things. Thanks for talking. Catch you later. So remember, the straw man, again, it could be the same type of thing we were talking about before with Jared Spool, where all of a sudden we're fighting about Afghan immigrants or other stuff. But like I said, I typically call it boxing ghosts, because somebody makes up something that isn't even real and then wants to fight that. And it can be so hard. Remember, all of these are designed to put you out of balance. They're all designed to weaken your argument, because now you're going to think, uh-oh, this person is fighting with me about Afghan immigrants. I better address that. And uh-oh, this person doesn't like my tone and says I'm being aggressive. I'd better address that. No, I'm not being aggressive. These are games. We're going to keep talking about the pyramid, but let me just tell you halfway through the show right now, the best thing you can do for your own health and sanity, other than not do these, is recognize them when they're being done to you. And remember, you do not have to respond to them. Usually when someone does these things to me, if anyone's ever seen me fight people on LinkedIn, for example, I will typically say, thank you for saying that I'm the dumbest person on the planet. That's ad hominem. I'm not going to fight that with you. Let's go back to the original point. Do you agree with this? Why or why not? Very often that person does not want to debate it and will just go back to something ad hominem or manipulative or whatever, and then I like to post this pyramid to them, and then I say, find yourself on this pyramid. I'm done here. Ana Lucia says, I wish I could say, I'm sorry you feel I'm being aggressive, because I'm not, but this is petty but satisfying. Yeah, be careful, because now you're not arguing your point anymore. You're arguing, are you aggressive or not? Am I upset or not? It's a distraction technique so that we're no longer talking about the uncomfortable thing that this person does not want to directly address head on. That's what I always say to people in these fights. If you cannot address the main topic head on, I'm not going to play games with you. I'm not going to respond to your ad hominem attacks. I'm not going to respond to gaslighting and manipulation. Either attack this head on or walk away. Steph says, I'm never sure how you answer straw man arguments. Often saying, but I never said that, just brings the person into more straw man arguments. Yeah, Dr. Ari tried that with Jared Spool that day. Dr. Ari was like, straw man. And Spool was like, what? You brought up surgeons, so it makes sense for me to talk about Afghan surgeons driving taxis. And that's where I go, ooh, Dr. Ari kind of made a little mistake there by opening that door accidentally. I know he was trying to make a point, but now you have that. And so I think, you know, I try to just refocus people on the original thing. Hey, should Afghan taxi drivers who are qualified to be surgeons is an interesting discussion, but it's not really directly related to the question of democratization of UX research. Let's stick to the democratization. Well, you brought up surgeons. Yes, but I didn't bring up Afghan surgeons driving taxis. So please stick to the original topic, or let's walk away and just disagree. So yeah, sometimes I say, if you watch me fight on LinkedIn, which happens sometimes, sometimes I say things like, I'm not going to fight you over something I never said, and it's extremely unfair for you to act like I did say that when I have not said that. So let's talk about the original point. Let's also talk about false dilemma. So false dilemma, sometimes called the false dichotomy logical fallacy, is when people give you limited options, usually focusing on two extremes. So for example, let's see, very common in politics. The example on the website I'm looking at says, America, love it or leave it. Obviously, those aren't your only two choices. So always be careful of the false dilemma where someone is locking you into two choices. We also see this in shitty LinkedIn posts that are designed to create engagement when someone says like, you know, which would you do? Would you do no research with whatever, or would you do bad research, you know, no research or bad research? And I'm always thinking, those aren't the only two choices. Why are we, what is this? Why are we doing this? What's the point of this fake debate? This is just to create fire and engagement. Ana Lucia says, how can you be worried about inflation when there are people dying in Africa, kind of stuff? Yeah, that's definitely a distraction. That's a bit of a red herring. Yes, people are dying all over the world, but that's got nothing to do with whatever we were talking about, so I'd probably say that's a red herring. LinkedIn user says, funny, I just read a French citation of a Chinese proverb this morning, which I can't pronounce French, so I'm just going to go with your translation of no need to raise one's voice when one is right. Yeah, that reminds me of a court case I was involved in many years ago, and we were well into presenting our sides to the judge. It was just me and the defendant and the judge, and I had presented a lot of evidence, and the person I was suing started saying really wild, untrue, bizarre things, and I was just like burning. I was like, oh, when am I going to get to say something? This is a pile of garbage. And, you know, neither of us had a lawyer. This was pretty casual. And I just said, Your Honor, may I be given the chance to respond to what the defendant is saying? And I'm trying to remember what exactly the judge said, but it was something along the lines of, you don't need to. You know, I don't remember the exact words he said, but my brain registered, shut up, you're winning. You know, and so, yeah, sometimes you don't have to say too much. When I find people, like, for example, sometimes I'm fighting on LinkedIn with agile coaches, and they'll say, here, lean UX and agile UX and customer centricity, design thinking, double diamond. And I usually say, hey, you're an agile coach. You're out there teaching companies how to do agile, right? How do you tell people to include UX processes and practitioners in an agile environment? Usually these people catch on fire and all the pyramid comes to life, at least the bottom half of it. Oh yeah, you don't know anything about agile. Oh, why should we listen to you? And you know, the whole wacky stuff. I mean, those are probably some of the weirdest fights I've had because these people could not answer at all. So my thought was, wow. And usually I'll write back, I'll say, I think you just proved to everybody looking at this that you have no answer. You have no answer, because in the time it took you to bitch me out and tell me what a terrible human being I am, you could have just told me how you tell people UX fits into agile, even the short version. So yeah, I think you just told everybody you don't know the answer. So going up the pyramid, we still have contradiction and sarcasm without supporting evidence. Oh yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, of course we never need to democratize UX research. Yeah, whatever Deb said. And sarcasm, contradiction with no evidence, these two are different things, but you know, while you're moving up the pyramid and at least you're not as awful, you're still not addressing the topic head on. LinkedIn user, hi, you don't know UX. I do get that. Yeah, I don't know if you're back in time when I said I have a degree in music, or if you're saying that now that we're 40 minutes into the show. But yeah, once in a while, somebody who is mad at me for a different reason will tell me, you can't possibly know anything about UX. You have a degree in music. And I'm thinking, find yourself on this pyramid. Bye. Block you later. And then, of course, at the top of the pyramid, we have where good conversations live. Counter argument. Hey, I see that you are against democratizing research and you have some reasons that make sense to you, but have you considered the problem with the cost and the time? Now, Is that directly addressing the topic? It might be, or it might be addressing something part of the topic, but I've got reasoning and I've got evidence, so assume that I'm giving that and I'm not just going, oh yeah, well you didn't even think about this, you're a loser. But anything where you are directly responding to the argument and giving your reasoning and evidence, or in some cases your opinions or your experience, which sometimes have weight and sometimes are just your opinions. But whatever you want to do, you want to refute the central point. Whatever this discussion is about, stay on that. That is the best way to go in any discussion. Stay away from all of these. Stay away. And when I see people doing them, I call them on their poor behavior and I say, I will not continue to discuss this with you if these are the things you're going to do. Find yourself on this pyramid. Anne, hi Anne, how can I use this while pitching to investors? It's basically an argument to give me money because of this versus I won't give you money because of that. The best thing you can do is continue to talk about the original point unless you have to dispute their point. Very often an investor that doesn't want to give you money has a reason. If they're telling you that reason and you have good evidence to the contrary, then you have to present that evidence. The goal here is to always be presenting useful reasoning and evidence. You don't want to do any of these other things where an investor says, you know, we don't want to work with you because we don't work with cake people. And then you can say, well, fuck you, you know, you hate cakes, you're a jerk. But you can say, well, hey, I've got a lot of evidence that shows that cake businesses generate $1 squillion of income in the economy and that no matter what's happening in the economy, people still buy cakes. This is a very viable business, and I've got a slide about that. Then you're talking about reasoning and evidence. You're not taking it personally. You're not turning it into something that's personal about you or about them. So I would have to hear what they're saying to you to give you an idea of what I might say. But I remember at a pitch meeting, I had a startup about 11 years ago, and it had to do with personal safety. And once in a while, a white guy listening to the pitch would be like, I don't understand why anybody needs this. You know, I'm safe. You know, and I would say, all the time? And they would go, yeah. And I would say, do you have daughters? And they would say, yeah. And I would say, are they safe all the time? And you would see them think for a moment, and they would be like, most of the time. And I would say, this is for those moments when we're not sure. You know, if you have daughters who work jobs after school, and they're out there after dark, and we don't know what could happen, this is for those moments. Do you ever worry about your wife? If you have a wife, do you have a wife? Are you ever worried about your wife? Do you have a husband? Or have you ever worried about your husband? So, you know, I try to stay on the argument, which is people need a personal safety system that I've invented, which is my startup is closed, but I had hope for it at the time. And when people said, when people at the pitch meeting said those things to me, I just tried to counter it with like, that's great that you're safe and that you're always safe and that you've never in your life been unsafe. You're lucky. That's wonderful. There are a lot of people who can't say that. You know, do you have daughters? Do you have a sister? You know, do you have an LGBTQ relative? They might not feel safe. And sometimes they were able to sympathize or say it with me, empathize with those people, and sometimes they couldn't. They were like, I don't get it. Everybody's always safe all the time. And I'm like, LinkedIn user says, meant in the context of the agile argument, the 40-second delay causing things to go off track. Yeah, sorry about that. And then sometimes I don't read it until minutes later, so total car crash on that one. So any thoughts or questions about the my variation of Graham's hierarchy of disagreement? You might prefer the original, in which case please use the original, use Graham's version. If you like my version, please use it. If you want to make your own version, go ahead. Nobody's stopping you. I don't own this. This is Graham's, and Graham gets the credit. Paul Graham. I'm just making a variation. I'm making a derivative here, and it may or may not be an improvement. Noisy Doll says, how do you deal with subject areas where there is a strong or common belief in conspiracy, like discussing health, when some people in the room claim you can't trust any doctors? You know, again, I come from a family of lawyers, so normally I would try to break down that argument with facts. If someone says, you know, you just can't trust doctors at all, I would say, really, have you always felt that way? Oh yeah, I've always felt that way, or I felt that way ever since that doctor did that wrong thing. Did a doctor ever do the right thing by you? Did a doctor ever help you? Probably they did. That person's going to have to think about it. Even people who've had bad experience with doctors and healthcare systems and hospitals has also usually had good experiences. And so typically, what I'll say to someone when I say, you know, has a doctor ever helped you? Did you ever get the prescription you needed, or some stitches, or the care you needed? Probably. So maybe it makes sense to say, sometimes we can't trust doctors. It's probably not always. That's going to be your generalization. Sometimes you can't trust doctors. Or sometimes you feel like you can't trust a doctor, even when the doctor's doing the right thing. You're like, is this the right thing? I'm not sure I trust it. So sure, sometimes we feel like we don't trust doctors. Maybe we feel like we don't trust them often because of something bad that happened to us or someone we care about. But ultimately, when you have a health problem, do you go to a doctor? So you probably trust them at least a little. So those are kind of the things that I try to do. But again, I come from a family of lawyers. And so usually arguments are unemotional. They're not about feelings. You just got to try to stick to behaviors and facts. Ana Lucia says, I recently had to find an ophthalmologist. 4 of them were terrible and didn't address the issue. The 5th one, perfect. I went on Google and everyone was saying wonders about him. Sure, we can have lots of bad experiences before we have a good one. We can have good experiences and then a bad one. I went to an allergist a couple of years ago here. He charged me a lot of money and never figured out what I was allergic to. That doesn't mean I'll never trust an allergist again, but I'm certainly not going to go back to him. And that's my choice. So, but again, when people generalize, then they say, oh, we can't trust doctors at all, or I can't trust science. And they go, well, I bet we can think of some instances where you do trust science. What about the weather report? Do you check weather reports? You know, what else is science? You know, there probably are some things that are scientific that you do trust. And that's okay. It's okay to trust these things sometimes and be suspicious of them other times, but we just have to look at that fairly and just be honest. Sometimes we trust this and sometimes we don't. Now you've already chipped away at that article, so that their argument. So if they're saying, I never did this, or you can't ever do this, you just got to find a way to chip away at that in a small way, where when they're using the generalization of all and every and never and no, that's where I just try to find that open window of, well, you probably do sometimes. Noisy Doll says, thanks. I think this is helpful to try to find common ground without alienating people who might benefit from being open to a viewpoint if they weren't that they weren't holding at the beginning of the conversation. And remember, you can't change other people. It's rare. You can hope to influence them, you can hope to get them thinking, but you can't change them. If someone sat down in an argument with me in a hope to make me more racist, they're not going to be able to do that. If someone wanted to sit down in an argument with me in a hope that I would be against marriage equality, they're not going to do that. So we have to remember that we have our own beliefs and we don't want to, very often, we don't want to change them. Sometimes we're open to it, sometimes we're not. Same is true for the other party. You have to make sure, am I going into this conversation or discussion hoping to change someone? And am I hoping to change an easy thing to change? Like, hey, I've been listening to this band Epica. I know it's not usually your thing, but I think I've got a few songs you might like. Easy to change. They may or may not like Epica. Easy to change. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about religion, social issues, poverty, inequality, political things. These are unlikely for people to change. You can try to chip away at them at a little bit, but you may or may not have success. Solomon, do you wash your hands after pooping before handling food? Is that a science question or you're just curious? Do you shy away from people coughing near you? Do you crack a few eggs before making an omelet? Yeah. I remember I went to a conference a few years ago before the pandemic when I was traveling to a lot of conferences, and I was in Arizona, and I was talking to one of the sponsors who had a table, so he was showing off his company, and we just got to talking about really general stuff. We had a very nice time talking, and all of a sudden it kind of hit him that he was very conservative and more right-wing, and I was liberal and more on the left. And he starts saying all these wacky things like, oh, you liberals, you know, you're so sensitive about safe spaces. And I said, I live in San Francisco and I don't know anybody who's talking about safe spaces. I think that's something people say liberals do, but I've never had a conversation with someone about a safe space. Now, funny enough, in our Slack channel in the last few days, we did mention a safe space. But at the time, I said to the guy, like, I live in San Francisco and none of us are talking to each other about safe spaces. That's not what I'm hearing. So I think this is something maybe you imagine we're talking about, but, you know, we're not. You know, and then he was like, oh, you liberals, you all want to see this and that and the other thing and whatever. And I was like, no, that's not happening. No. Yeah, I said, you know, this isn't going very well. I said, you know, any sentence that starts with you liberals is probably not going to bring us closer together. And unfortunately, in most cases, it's not true. It sounds like you're just working from Fox News talking points. I said, which can be entertaining and interesting and attention grabbing, but none of these things you're saying are reality for me, but yet you're telling me that this is my reality. This isn't going very well. Do you want to talk about something else? You want to switch the topic? Do you like dogs? So, you know, we're not going to necessarily get everybody to change, even when we have a good argument. Even if we could say, that's not my reality, that's not the reality of people I know, that's sometimes not enough. The other person is sure of their stance and sure of how they think this conversation should end, and it may not get there, and that's something that is good for people to work on for their own acceptance. You know, I say it at the beginning of my book. Hey, did you know I have a book? I say it at the beginning of my new book, Customers Know You Suck. I say it in our workshops. You know, I know if you're here, you want to be a low ego action hero. You're not always going to be able to make the change you want. Sometimes there's just too much resistance to the change you're trying to make, even if you're trying to make the right change for all the right reasons. Sometimes we just can't do it. We just have too many people blocking us, or too big people blocking us. Don't let that weigh on your mental health. Don't absorb that into your fabric. Don't wear it. Don't become it. Keep it at arm's length. Say, okay, that person feels that way, that person sees things that way, they can. I'm over here doing this. I'm over here doing my thing. I don't have to believe that. I don't have to agree with it. And depending upon what it is, I don't have to accept it. That's another thing that I remind people. Sometimes people think, oh, you know, oh, if you find a really far right-wing Nazi, you know, you should listen to them. Let's listen to them. Let's see if we can have empathy and listen to these people. Let's hear them out. You don't have to. If you've watched me fight with people on LinkedIn, you know I am happy to walk away once we are in blue-purple territory, blue-violet territory. You know, and I would include racist stuff, homophobic stuff, ageist stuff, I would put that in ad hominem. That's just lumping people into groups and pooping on that group. That's arguing people instead of the point. So as soon as I see any of those things, I think, I don't have to be here. I don't have to talk about this. I don't have to accept what they're saying. I don't have to agree with what they're saying. Okay, that's true for you. Enjoy that. You do you. I'm not gonna play. You do not have to spend your time on these people and things. No one ever looked back and said, oh, remember that fight on LinkedIn I was in on like August 25th, 2022? I should have put more effort into that. I should have spent more time fighting that person on that thing. Said no one ever. Put yourself first. You can walk away from these conversations. You can walk away from ugly conversations with anybody. You can walk away from ugly conversations with family. You can walk away from, unless someone's pointing a gun at you, you can walk away. You can walk away from ugly conversations with people on social media, LinkedIn, wherever. You don't have to stick around. No one said you have to stick around and see this through to some unknown endpoint. I also remind people, before you get into these, what's your desired outcome? What do you hope will happen at the end of this conversation? Do you hope that you've convinced people to believe a bunch of things they clearly don't believe now? You can try, but it's unlikely. Be careful of your expectations. Ana Lucia says, how do you deal with your feelings afterwards? I may walk away, but then I keep thinking about it and I get angry about it. I always tell people there's a window in which you are allowed to have whatever feelings you want. That could be minutes, hours, maybe a day. After a day, I try to suggest that people start letting it go. Let it go. Let it go. Just let it go. Because it's not serving you. You want to process your feelings, you want to be with those feelings, you want to share those feelings with friends and family, people who care about you, spouse, partner, dogs. I love to talk to my dogs about this stuff. Malika says, I love this topic. Thanks, Debbie, and everyone who shared examples. Steph says, ha, frozen. I tell people, I'm not going to tell you don't feel something or stop feeling something. Be with those feelings. Think about your reactions. Why did that make you angry? Why did you have that reaction? If you can go there, you'll get to know yourself better. Why did I have that reaction? Oh, because you know what? I get triggered when people say boop bop beep to me. Oh yeah, that gets me every time. They really got it. They stepped right on my personal landmine. They got me. Okay, so I need to think a little bit more about some of my personal landmines. Use this as an opportunity for growth. Be angry if you want to be, and then find your way out of that. See if you can find a way to not be so angry the next time. And you know, like I see Spool and stuff, and I go, wow, I really dislike this guy. I dislike everything about this guy. What the hell? And then I have to breathe and go, I can't control him. I can't do anything about it. I can just be the best me possible and keep making the best decisions possible for who I want to be. If he wants to be unethical, that's his. If he wants to talk out of both sides of his mouth, that's his. If he wants to steal from me, that's his. If he wants to be a yucky poopy head, that's ad hominem, but that's his. I don't have to make that part of my fabric. I don't have to carry that around with me. I can let it go. Hey, Spool said something stupid yesterday, again, and it made me grumpy for 20 minutes, and then I talked to one of my dogs, and now I feel fine. So just make sure that you have given yourself a way out of the anger and the negative feelings, because otherwise you'll stay there longer than you want. You'll stay there longer than you need to. A lot of these things are not worth it. I spend a lot of time pooping on Jared Spool, but in reality, he's nothing. He's nobody. Some of you haven't even heard of him. Some of you go, who is this guy you keep talking about? That's right, he's irrelevant. He's nothing. He's nobody. I spend too much time on him because I'm unhappy with who he is and what he does. That's my problem. I can't change him. I actually think I have changed him. That's a topic for another day. But I've noticed in the past couple of years, what he teaches has changed a lot. The more he steals from me, the more his message has changed. I actually do have a hypothesis that I have changed him, but not directly, not because I've ever spoken to him. So that's a different story. But I think we have to think about, remember a lot, and Ana Lucia, I would say this could also tie back to your expectations. Sometimes we're angry after those conversations because they didn't end or go the way we thought they would. Why did we think they would go that way? You know, I had a, let's just say a difficult family member in my world for many years, who I eventually cut ties with. And whenever I would go to therapy, because I was in therapy for many years, whenever I would talk about this person, I would always say, she's a good person, but, and then list like a variety of awful things that this person did. And finally, luckily, I had a therapist who said to me, what's your definition of a good person? And I thought, oh, that's a great question. Let's think about that. So I thought about it a little. I gave my definition of a good person. And, excuse me, then my therapist said, what's your definition of a bad person? And I said, well, I guess that would be the opposite. Someone who does this and that and this and that. And she said, and based on your definitions, is this family member a good person or a bad person? And it was like, oh, my whole world just made a lot more sense. I said, this is a bad person. And she said, if this is a bad person, let's stop saying this is a good person, but it was life-changing. Ana Lucia, when those are digital like emails, I sometimes write an answer, I sleep on it, I never send it. Writing the answer helped me get over it. Yeah, sometimes I write things I never send. Sometimes I just close it and I go talk to Pier Mario. I remember, I think it was last year, I had had a very, very ugly private message on LinkedIn with someone I won't name, who you would certainly know. And I was very unhappy with how that conversation went. I felt that person was being manipulative. I felt that person was saying some unacceptable manipulative things. And I was like, F this. And I closed the computer and I said to my now husband, I said, let's go for a walk. It was like 11 at night. And he was like, okay. So we closed down the house. And we walked up the street and we got to the little village where we live. And here it is like 11:30 at night. And we found like a whole bunch of people from the village were out and their kids were all playing together and all the moms and dads were hanging out and smoking. And it was like, oh, wow, I'm just going to go talk to these really nice people. We were there until like 12 something in the night. You're allowed to walk away from that conversation. And you don't have to go back to it. And in fact, that helped so much that after that, I was like, remember that day we were in the village at midnight? Why were we there again? Couldn't even remember. LinkedIn user, how do you suggest people work around these argument tactics with superiors at the workplace? Oh, Ana Lucia says, great strategies, thank you. Okay, so with superiors at the workplace, I think it really depends. A lot of this is personal and cultural. I do a lot of the same things in the workplace. Obviously, that doesn't always win me friends, but I handle these things the same way in the workplace. When people are manipulative, I call them out about it. When people are messing with me, I'm usually saying something to them or my manager. But again, that's culturally who I am. Some of that is my natural personality, which many people will not have my personality, and I don't expect you to. And some of that is the culture in which I grew up, which is a very in-your-face, doesn't back down, fuck everybody kind of culture. Many people come from cultures where it's more important to be polite. I do not come from that culture. I come from a famously impolite culture. So now I've managed to temper that over time, so I don't want to be an impolite person. But I don't have a very huge tolerance for bullshit. I'm likely to say or do something. So if it's superiors, and again, you'd have to give me an example, but when superiors say, I remember I was at a job once and they wanted me to do a design and they just wanted me to rip off the competitor. And it was a pretty bad idea. And even the competitor's design wasn't that great. And I wasn't convinced that it was even going to be right for our customers. So I told the product manager who was bossing me around on that one. And I said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to design this. We're going to put it right into the product without, you don't want me to test it because you think it's so good because it's on the competitor's site. You're going to put this out there. Based on the metrics you create, it's going to fail. You're going to pretend that it's a winner. And then in 6 months, when somebody spins up a let's declutter this page project, your feature is going to be removed. And I hope someone asks you to answer for that. And he was like, you're dramatic. I said, that's fine. I'll write this all down. And he said, just do it. Just design what I'm telling you to do. I said, that's fine. I'll just make a note of all the things I've just said and that I have to design what you're telling me to do. And the wonderful thing was it happened exactly as I said. It went live. It didn't do well. It stayed up for a few months. And literally 6 months later, someone did a page decluttering project and removed it. So, I was like, fine. This guy was an absolute jerk. I mean, this guy is below the argument pyramid. There is a level on the pyramid that I did not even get to that this guy is so bad that he was on. True story, Rocklock 666. It was a true story. The worst, that was pretty bad. But to me, one of the worst things this guy did was he knew I was deathly allergic to fish. He invited me into the smallest conference room in the building, and while meeting with me, slowly ate a tuna fish sandwich. I thought that was a new level of low. I thought that was really special. I thought you really have to be a pretty bad person to do that. Solomon says, and they deflected from taking responsibility or accountability. Yeah, where I worked, the PMs didn't take any responsibility or accountability, and they were always manipulating the numbers to make it look like something good happened from their crappy disaster projects. And it was just ridiculous. So look, I have boldness. I have honesty. Yes, I can sometimes say things a little bit more tactfully. Sometimes I'm less tactful. But I'm that person who's probably going to say something. I don't expect most of you to say anything. People don't have my personality. You come from cultures where politeness is more important. You're more likely to be polite. But I think that consider what you can do that matches your culture, that maybe is fact-based. I'm always fact-based and I'm always unemotional. I'm never like, I don't think that's good because I don't like it and it's going to make me feel bad, or don't you understand my job? These come off very emotional. So I just stick to, here's the thing. Anne says, your allergist should have diagnosed your bullshit allergy. Well, yeah, this was a different, no, so I knew the fish allergy already. The allergist from 2 years ago, that didn't help me. What happened was I tried some cousin of Flonase, like Italy's answer to Flonase, and I can do Flonase in America. It's a, allergy nasal spray. And I bought what was supposed to be Italy's equivalent of it, and I took it, and I ended up having a reaction that was so severe that I ended up in the emergency room. Now, of course, my question was, how did that happen? What am I allergic to? What could I be allergic to that's in this thing? I should know that. I'd like to know. I don't want this to happen again. And the guy ran some tests, and he couldn't figure it out. So, not happy with him. Gave up. I gave up on that. LinkedIn user says, high school petty vengeance. Yeah, I don't know. I assume you're talking about the tuna fish sandwich. I don't know. I really don't know. But it was also the day that I realized I do not have to eat tuna to have a tuna reaction. I always thought that I had to eat the fish to have a fish reaction. But all of a sudden, here I am in the smallest conference room in the building, designed for 2 people at a tiny table. And I realize I can actually get a reaction just by being near it. That's good to know. But, ouch, I gotta go. Ana Lucia says, Flonase is life. I had a good so I actually found something here that works really well for me. They call it Xyzal. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It was like XYZAL or something like that. Not sponsored. I'm not telling anybody to buy any particular allergy medication, but I did find Xyzal worked for me. So I'm just gonna. So for me, Xyzal is life. Whatever the hell it is. I think Xyzal is the Italian cousin of, somebody name American allergy medicines, of Zyrtec. Yeah. Not sponsored. Not sponsored, everybody, but that worked for me. Okay, we've gone too late, and at least one of you knows that I have a call in about 20 minutes. Hi, Tara Butler. How have you been? Holy cats. I hope to see you someday soon. So anyway, thanks to everybody for staying late. Thanks for turning this wacky argument pyramid show idea, which I think Steph and Shweta had asked for, into a fun, successful show that hopefully has given people some ideas about entering into difficult conversations, and really looking for the other person to be doing these things. And that's how you know you want to try to get out of that conversation, or do what you can to change the vibe of the conversation, to redirect that conversation. You know, when people said to me at that job, oh, you're just being dramatic and hysterical, and I say, well, I know I'm not, and that sounds like an unfair characterization, but I'm just talking factually about how the project is likely to go, so I'll just document this, and then if it happens, we'll all be able to point to it and say, well, this could have been avoided. But you know, this is my prediction, whether or not you think I'm dramatic and hysterical. So, you know, that's your impression of me. It's unfair, it's unpleasant, and next time, let's not say these things. Paula, thank you, Paula, for all your claps today. Last time it was thumbs up, this time I'm getting applause. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's talk about what shows are coming up this week. We got a lot going on in the rest of February. Oh, my calendar is so full I can't even look at it closely. You'll want to be here tomorrow because it is office hours with Dr. Nick. We've already got 3 questions in, so if you want to send yours in, head on over to deltacx.com/links. I've switched us back to our old question asking system. It's just easier for it to come into my email as a survey response rather than video ask, which was an experiment and Wednesday is book club. We are reading, believe it or not, my new book, Customers Know You Suck. We'll be talking about Chapter 8. If you haven't read Chapter 8 yet, you're still welcome at book club. And if you want to ask questions about other chapters, you're still welcome at book club. No charge. Go to deltacx.com/links and check the event, or join our Discord and Slack, which are completely free, and check the live events channel in each for the Google Meet room. The book club is not on YouTube. Thursday, I'm going to be doing some slides that some of you requested. Some of you requested my slides on how do I do some of the math on the value of UX staff and the value of research. So I'll be talking about those slides, and that'll be Thursday. It's a special extra show I've thrown in this week since we usually don't do Thursdays. Friday is Critical Thinking Stream. I've already received, I think, 5 entries, and we're also going to have a frank and probably slightly painful discussion about something that happened in our Slack community, to me personally, in the last few days. I'm still thinking about it, and I would like to open up the conversation to more of you just to get your opinions on it, because my opinion is not the only one that matters, and especially given the topic of this, my opinion is the least one that matters. So that'll be critical thinking. So we've got a week packed. I'm doing something every day, 6:30 p.m. Italy time, most of it here on YouTube. So again, please do subscribe and let friends know about the channel. Tell them about how we are helping people learn CX and UX, and we are helping people be critical thinkers and giving them some job skills. If you have any questions, just leave a comment under the YouTube video. Please don't leave a comment on the LinkedIn video. I cannot get to those later. It's a really bad interface. UX, y'all. But leave one under the YouTube. I always answer them personally. Thanks again to everybody who joined in. This was a super show with a lot to think about. And if you can make that pyramid better, please do. And let me get ready to play us out of here. Bad UX, ha ha ha. Yeah, we live it. Job security, y'all. Though unfortunately none of us have job security right now. That is a topic for another show. So thanks again for hanging out. This was super fun. I loved our discussions, and I will see everybody tomorrow for me and Dr. Nick doing our office hours Ask Me Anything. Have a great day or evening, everybody.
Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are